So then I'd like to formally welcome everyone for today's webinar organized by the Swiss Canadian Chamber of Commerce. I'm Sandra Luba. I'm the president of the Chamber, and it's my pleasure to introduce the crypto carnage and the future of blockchain today. 2022 was a difficult year for the economy in general, but even more so for the cryptocurrencies and the companies that trade them. And I don't think anyone is predicting that the roller coaster will be over as we move onwards in 2023. So we're very pleased to have Alexander Brunner with us to help understand the movements that have taken place and that we may expect in the coming months, especially about the hope that many have put into blockchain as a new economic tool. Alexander is the author of the book Crypto Nation Switzerland, the Swiss Digital Asset and Wealth Management Report in 2021, and the Swiss Digital Asset Market Report 2022. Last year, Alexander launched the Home of Blockchain, a public-private partnership that promotes Switzerland's blockchain economic system internationally. From 2015 until 2022, Alexander was a member of parliament in the city of Zurich. Today, he is a senior executive advisor to international tech companies and governments. After Alexander has finished his remarks, there will be time for questions. Also, we will be holding questions until Alexander has finished. You can enter questions by writing into the tab at the bottom of your screen at any time. Once it is open for questions, you may also use the tab at the bottom of your screen to raise your hand if you have a question, and we will unmute you so that you can pose your question verbally. And the chat function is disabled, so just that you know, you cannot use the chat function. And the one final point is that we are recording the Q&A as well as the whole presentation. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor, so to speak, to Alexander. Thank you.
A big thank you to you, Sandra, Swiss Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and also Mike Stewart for making it happen. One of our partners is Switzerland Global Enterprise, and an extension are the business hubs. So I'm always happy to welcome members around the world. And I think in the next, as Sandra said, in the next 30 minutes, I want to address, the big questions in the room. Has FTX killed crypto, or where is crypto going to go? And I think the first takeaway, if all of you can take that home, is that crypto doesn't equal blockchain, or blockchain is not crypto. That the different use cases I'd like to highlight it a bit. I'd like also to highlight a bit the role of Switzerland in this whole global ecosystem. I think we do have a leading role. And last but not least, I've been studying research reports, and they're all fully aware that about prediction for crypto for 2023 is it will remain volatile. Everyone seems to agree that. They also agree on that for the equity markets. But joking aside, thank you for the introduction. Like I said, I've been active in the Swiss ecosystem for 7 years now. I've seen a few boom and bust cycles, and I think I've seen the whole environment and all the ecosystem developing. And sometimes what the headlines are saying does not always represent what's happening on the ground. And I hope that today I can address some of those issues, and also addressing, where is it going from here? Is it the end or not? And let me try to share my screen. I hope I can do it myself. Yeah, it works. Wonderful. Right. So it's working. All right, great. All right. Always a big thank you to our partners. We are a public-private partnership, so we have partners such as Eternals, Cardano, it's a blockchain, Layer 1 protocol, Signum, Inroad. We got Cantons as partners with Single Enterprise, and some trade associations. So our sole mission is to promote the Swiss blockchain ecosystem abroad and tell everyone how amazing Switzerland is. Like I said, in the next 25 minutes, I want to start with a short review of the Swiss ecosystem, because I think it has told us a few important learnings, how to do innovation, how not to do innovation. I'm going to address what's happened last year, not only FTX, which is sort of a fraud, but a bit of a wider view on things. And then where the Swiss ecosystem is today, and also, but it's very close to my heart, there's different use cases for the blockchain technology. Crypto is one, but there are many other exciting ones, and I'd like to highlight a few of them. All right, so this is a very busy chart, and basically what it's trying to tell is, it all started back in 2013 with the formation of the first, you could argue, crypto exchanges or companies. Be consistent, look at, they're still around. And at the same time, what you see on top, we've had different initiatives. We had the Ethereum Foundation set up shop in 2014. We had the first engagements, the first end entities starting out, including the first banks, like in 2016, Fontobel with, and that's where it gets interesting, the first crypto banks in 2019. And at the lower level, you see many Swiss flags. And what is really key for the Swiss ecosystem, I think that makes it quite unique on a global scale, is Switzerland has a very federal structure. You can say a decentralized structure. So you've seen different activities from the city of Zug accepting Bitcoin all the way to the regulator issuing an ICO guideline in 2018, and then the national parliament passing a DLT law, a blockchain law, in 2020. And I think what makes the Swiss ecosystem unique is exactly that. We have a combination of private initiatives, companies setting up, and then sort of different cities, cantons, and even the government reacting to it. So in contrast to, let's say, Singapore, where things are really top down, where the government decides certain initiatives and then it gets implemented. In the Swiss ecosystem, you have this decentralized grassroots aspect. And I do believe that this is quite a clever way of doing innovation. As you might remember, Switzerland on a regular basis gets voted as one of the most innovative countries in the world. I think it's a bit rooted in here. So this is just a very, very brief history. But what I'm trying to say is that Switzerland has always had private initiatives that were followed up by regulation and an administration following up. So yeah, I think it was a very clever way. That's also reflected in a wider perspective. Crypto is part of fintech, and fintech, when you rank ecosystems, I mentioned Singapore before. This is just one study ranking different ecosystems. Singapore is very investment and innovation friendly. But as you can see here, so is Zurich and Geneva, even ahead of London. And no, there's different ways of slicing and dicing it, but I think Switzerland is among the top contenders for the fintech ecosystems in the world. You can also see that on top. Last year in the Swiss startup space, there was $3.9 billion raised for startups, for Swiss startups, and that's an increase of 30%. So the ecosystem has been developing, including the funding that apparently is very important. This sort of funding drive and this ecosystem drive has also led to some very notable successes. Last year in September, one of our partners, 21 Company, it's a company based in Zurich as well as in the US that issues crypto investment products. You can buy exchange traded products easily through a bank account. And they achieved the unicorn status in September by raising 25 million. And they're now active across the world. They're active in the US, they're active in the Middle East, all the way to Asia, making the cryptosphere accessible to normal investors through bank accounts. So it's a typical startup, I would argue, by sort of combining the tech savviness of Switzerland innovation aspect and combining it with the financial background that we have as Switzerland as a strong global financial center. Having spoken about now the private sector moving to the public sector, this is quite an interesting initiative that started last year. And the city of Lugano, so it's not the canton, it's even a city, they launched a payment system based on blockchain technology. It's called the Luga, and then they evolved into a Bitcoin payment system. So in Lugano, in the city of Lugano, among about 200 shops, you can pay with your wallet, with your crypto wallet, and pay through Bitcoin. They have been supported by Tether, that's a stablecoin project. They're now creating a co-working space, and they organized, as you can see here, last year, a conference. So coming back to what I said earlier, it is a showcase how one city in Switzerland sort of takes initiative and creates a new interesting format. I've been told that other cities are now looking into similar innovation projects. So again, it's sort of a bottom-up initiative at the intersection of the public sector and the private sector. And to all the startups I've been talking to who are active in this space, one of the things that comes up all the time is how approachable sort of the Swiss regulator, the Swiss administrator is. And just to give you a very graphic example, Paula, our director, who's also in the call, we attended an event during the World Economic Forum, and we bumped at a bar into our minister, Alain Berset, currently our president. So he's even mingling with the startup crowd. So I think that's really something that sets the Swiss ecosystem apart. You can easily approach members of parliament, the government, the administrator, as well as the regulator. So that's Switzerland. Now a bit looking back to what happened last year. I'm sure across the big pond, similar effects as here in Europe. After a multi-year bull market with zero interest rates or negative interest rates, things changed dramatically. It was a surge in inflation, and what you can see in the top right, by now it's been even much higher, is the US Fed rate, and now approaching almost 5%. So a market that was sort of fueled by cheap money or even free money, all of a sudden entered a phase where there was surging inflation, interest rate hikes. So obviously that had negative effects on the stock markets around the world. You can see S&P, the US market was down 21%, the tech-heavy NASDAQ was minus 23%. So there was a big channel, correction across the board. And the first sectors that started laying off or were affected was finance. After multi-year bull market, M&A, investment banking, obviously down markets are not good for banks. So those are just two examples. Credit Suisse announced that they're going to lay off 2,700 people, and Goldman Sachs of 3,200 announced. Not only finance was impacted, obviously also the tech sector. And I'm sure some of you have read about the 10,000s of tech employees being laid off. Google announced 12,000 people, Microsoft 10,000, and Twitter, after Elon Musk took over, shed more than half of its staff. What I find interesting is just worth pointing out, and that's the chart on the right, where you see the purple bar is how many employees were hired during the pandemic. So from fourth quarter 2019 until the third quarter last year. And as you can see, it started with Microsoft on top, they hired 77,000 people. So now they're laying off 10,000. So and if you look at Google, they hired a bit less, 67,880, and now they're letting go a bit more. But overall, I'm just setting here a bit the scene. Yes, tech is correcting. As some of the tech stocks have shed a lot of valuation or been bouncing back, like in the case of Meta. I think there's pain in the financial system and there's pain in the tech system. But that's sort of the takeaway from those things. It's at the end of a multi-year bull market where corrections happening, but the sectors are still large and growing. So and one way you can see that, and I think that's quite an interesting chart by an insight provider called CB Insights. And what you're looking here is you see different startup types or what kind of maturity level startups are. So seed angel is when you start off, you have just an idea. Series A is typically when you have product market fit. And then Series B is you're entering when you're growing and so on. So those different A, B, C, Ds, basically the further down as a company, as a startup, the longer you've been around and the bigger you've been. And some of you might have been aware of that. Obviously you had in the last 2 years those mega rounds, literally so many unicorns being created. FTX was one example. They raised more than $100 million from different investors that were valued at $32 billion. So what you saw at this end of the cycle is that a lot of those startups increased their valuation. They had a massive funding round. And now with the change in interest rate, with capital becoming dearer, you see the valuations dropping. So again, when you start on top, interesting, the very early stage, the seed angel stage, when you're literally starting off with an idea, you see there's still a slight increase in median elevation to the valuation to 12.6 million. And as you can see, as you move down this chart, Series A, that median round size is about 57 million, then it goes up above 100 million. And what you can see is sort of the biggest drop in valuation happened at a later stage, Series B and C, and decreasing again in D. But in summary, this economic repercussion that sort of with interest rates going up and capital becoming more expensive, it not only impacted banking and technology, obviously it has impacted the whole startups. So we are in an economy where things are being reset, or as some finance people like to say, there's a bit of mean reversion going on. Things that have been inflated are now being cut back. So this is a bit the setting, the scene, how we sort of left 2022. And the question now is, how do we enter 2023? And what does it mean for the blockchain system? Again, after we've seen that, crypto also suffered. Bitcoin price suffered last year, went down 60%, and we had FTX, the fraud / bankruptcy that sort of triggered across the entire board. Celsius was a lender, Gemini was also a lender. A lot of pain. And what we basically saw last year is like everyone was leveraged to the hilt. People took on so much leverage that when the markets changed, obviously losses were severe. So US exchange, Coinbase, the crypto exchange, their share price dropped 87% in 2022. So that's quite a dramatic drop, and they've been shedding stuff. So the climate also among venture capital funding, as the chart I saw before for crypto, it has changed from exuberance to sort of, really a bit of consolidation in the industry. So we have this sort of drop, and now the question is how to go forward. And that's sort of circling back to my initial chart about a Swiss ecosystem. And I think what we have seen, and FTX, I think, is a prime example, besides it being a fraud. Let's put that aside. I mean, it was clearly a fraud, but what they basically did, there was so much funding they got, those hundreds of millions they got at this, 32 billion valuation. They had so much money. And when that happens to any organization, it doesn't lead to more discipline when it comes to business. So as you know, they had got naming rights of the Miami Stadium. They were sponsoring for Formula One. So a lot of, now in retrospect, silly things. And I think it's very much an American approach to innovation that is sort of supercharged by venture capital funding. And as venture capital investors believe, that you have to grab the market, you have to be first mover. So the more money you have, the better that happens. And I think some of you might remember Mark Zuckerberg once famously said to move fast and break things. And that's sort of the bit, I guess, the sales pitch for the responsible Swiss approach today is, I think the Swiss ecosystem, as we've seen, had sort of two very fundamentally different approach, or the approach was in two aspects very different to the American. One, there was not this massive amount, this avalanche of money going into startups, leading them to do literally stupid things. I think we've never seen that. It's always been more level-headed. It's more about let's go slow and steady and figure things out. And the second thing is, in contrast to the US, as I mentioned before, the Swiss have given a lot of thought, the regulator, to what kind of licenses they're giving. So by now we have licenses for crypto banks. We have licenses for wealth managers. We have licenses for crypto brokers. We have licenses for custodians. and even investment funds. So the interesting bit about the Swiss approach was like, let's give licenses to those who fulfill our criteria, who want to play by the rule. And I think by virtue of that, we've been repelling sort of the more gung-ho startups that now, as I mentioned before, are really suffering. And a lot of them are in the US. So a fundamentally different approach to innovation. Obviously, during a boom time, the entire industry is complaining that the Swiss are not moving too fast. They should be, move faster, let things happen. But I think the Swiss approach sort of has its merits of saying we want responsible innovation. We provide guardrails, and we want everyone in Switzerland to be good citizens. If you don't want to do that, feel free to go to any other jurisdictions. And as a proof of point, I think that's it's a very nice one. Signum, our partner, the crypto bank, they saw almost 1 billion net new money in the last quarter. And that was a direct effect of everyone getting really scared, having vast amounts of money with crypto exchanges that are based abroad and have no licenses. And it's good. They haven't cut any headcount system yet. So I think in summary, yes, obviously the crypto winter is overall a negative for the ecosystem, but so far we've seen no big frauds, no big bankruptcies. There's a few, Covari is one example that happened, but overall, I think we can be sort of happy or content at the moment that the Swiss ecosystem has held up to the pressure. I know as a fact, talking to American colleagues like the FCCC and the CFTE are clamping down big time in the US. They're going after anyone who's operating at the intersection of the fiat currency, US dollar and crypto. So we don't have that. And that sort of gives me hope that once the industry rebounds, the ecosystem will be really well placed. Because all this experience we've had since 2013 really also educated the entire ecosystem. So going forward, so putting that aside, the question is where do we see growth? What's going to be next? And I think that's hopefully a message everyone can take home. As I mentioned before, like blockchain, the technology enables different use cases, and crypto is one of them. I haven't even listed it here because you're all familiar with it, I think, but there's different use cases, and we'll run through them. I mean, the traditional financial and decentralized finance intersection is very interesting, creating a new decentralized infrastructure. You have the whole Web3 greater economy, and you have what I call big tech in industry, so more industrial applications. And all of them have a big difference. I mean, I guess the simplest explanation what crypto is, if you look at Bitcoin, it's you invest or you believe in a network, in an algorithm. There's no underlying value except the network and the algorithm. If you look at fiat currencies, US dollars, or at stocks of companies or bonds, obviously there's an underlying real asset that is giving value to that. So the big difference is once you leave crypto aside, those are all use cases where they're sort of tying into the real world with real assets, and the blockchain just being a new way of transacting. Just a few examples, and I'm trying to highlight how innovation happens in Switzerland. This is quite an interesting stablecoin project. CBDC stands for crypto bank digital central bank digital currency. That's a project at the intersection of the Swiss National Bank, the Bank for International Settlement Innovation Hub, and FTX, the Swiss exchange. And so they've done some tests of those stable coins in fiat currencies, in that case, Swiss francs. So a really high level testing this technology in this real world asset. The underlying asset is the Swiss franc. Will they pursue it? There are different tests going on. They haven't decided what they want to do. Coming back to Lugano, the city of Lugano issued very recently in January a bond, a Swiss franc bond in a digital format. So they mirrored the bond on the public blockchain. Again, an example of how the public blockchain acts as a new decentralized financial infrastructure. that allows real world assets to be traded transaction in different ways. So this is, again, has nothing to do with crypto. It's using the blockchain as a decentralized financial infrastructure with very real world assets in the form of credit of the Silicon. But it's going further. This is also quite an interesting Swiss project. Up to Narad, they have, based on the Ethereum blockchain, they let small and medium-sized enterprises list their shares. So there's a few companies you can see there. So you can list your share in a very efficient way, and then you can create a marketplace that exists and you can trade them. So something that as a smaller sized enterprise, up to now you can't really do. Only the big companies can get a stock market listing. So again, a very interesting use case how this new technology, and this is fully compliant, is regulated by a Swiss regulator. You get this new functionality of this decentralized blockchain and allows you new use cases that haven't been possible. So that's a very nice showcase how you can create use cases enabled by the blockchain. Now moving into this, what I call Web3, that's another Swiss company and maker, and they've created sort of an NFT marketplace and tokenization platform where they've done a very nice project about an ebook, and now they're doing ebooks, they do audiobooks and even movies. So it allows you as a creator, if you create a movie or you write a book, to interact on those on the chain, have the marketplace, have the whole financial and payment infrastructure in place, so you can become you sort of don't need any third-party provider anymore. You can issue your own creative content and be in control of it. So this is growing very fast, particularly among the younger generation. Again, it's enabled by the blockchain. This one is in Cardano, one of our partners, and has nothing to do as such in a way as crypto per se. And before I stop, I just want to quickly share a video. Let me try to start it. I quickly stop the screen sharing and start the video. 1 second. All right. Almost done. There we go. Oh, that's working. So there we go. Okay. Let me share here again. I hope it works. Second try. Okay, looks good. Oh. I don't know. You should be now seeing a car.
Yes.
Perfect.
Faces challenges.
I don't know if that works.
Pollution, crumbling infrastructure. The demand for technological innovation is urgent. 3D AI City is a computer vision platform that provides relevant, actionable, and anonymized urban data. Data that helps detect what is happening in the city while it's happening. Mobile devices are being deployed onto vehicles operating in the city, turning them into data harvesters. A constant stream of real-time data is accessed, enabling immediate resource deployments, more efficient urban planning, and contributing to a safer environment for people.
I'm just going to stop here, but I'll go back. I don't need to screen share. So the interesting bit, what I've shown you is a new technology. You're probably wondering what does have AI and computer vision to do with the blockchain, but this is a company actually I'm invested in working with, and that's real. You can take a mobile phone, put it in your car, and it starts collecting data about the environment. It creates what they call digital twin. And if you think about that, and I think this is where I see the biggest potential for blockchain is when you have these more and more devices, mobile phones, satellites, drones connected to the internet in a decentralized fashion, you always have the same issues. The issues is how do you keep the data safe? How do you make it tamper-proof? How do you ensure privacy? How can you interact? And guess what? Those are exactly use cases that the blockchain enables you in a decentralized infrastructure. So it's not controlled by one entity, not Amazon or Apple, but in a it runs in different services. It lets all those devices interact. And I think going into the future, to me, this is the biggest use case, because you can have all those functionalities in the blockchain. You can make sure who has access, you can make it tamper-proof, keep it safe, make sure privacy is enforced, and even identity. So I think, when you take a step back from the pure crypto, I think the blockchain will have a very important part to play in the future, because you will have those issues of all those devices. So here is the chart. So, if you believe that in the future there'll be more devices connected to the internet in a decentralized fashion, and they're exchanging data, you have to address those issues. And I think Switzerland is really well positioned, because we care about privacy, we care about security, and decentralization, as I explained in the beginning, is in our DNA. So I truly hope that, that we move away from the pure crypto FTX discussion. I think crypto is an interesting new use case for digital money, but there's much more than that. You can use it in music, in as I mentioned before, in small and medium-sized enterprise, and the whole digitization of the financial world with real-world assets. And with that, I hope that you see many interesting use cases that are currently being built, and they're still being built despite of what's happening in the crypto winter. So with that, thank you very much. And with that, actually, I'm advising companies, if anyone has questions about coming to Switzerland, I'm happy to help them. And you can also visit our website or contact me through email if you have any questions. Thank you very much. I think now, Ms. Mike, you're going to moderate. I don't know, you there?
Yes. Well, Alexander, that was a fantastic presentation, really taking us through a very holistic view of the sector. And I think, it's important that we do think about how blockchain and cryptocurrencies are part of the economy, and increasingly part of the economy. And the economy's been rocked in the last year or so. And there's lots of exciting things coming forward from, as we heard from you, in the blockchain space. So that was very interesting to hear that, and to hear your very positive perspective on the future of blockchain. So thank you very much for that.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Mark.
For everyone in the audience, we're going to open it up to questions now. You can either put something in the Q&A down at the bottom of your panel, or you can just push the raise hand button, and we will endeavor to unmute you so that you can be involved in the discussion. So first of all, I just have a question, and with Lugano issuing this digital bond on the blockchain. So can you help me understand, Alexander, why that is advantageous for them versus, they could issue a digital bond other ways, I suppose. How is doing it on the blockchain? How does that help Lugano? How does that make things better for them? And is it more complicated for them?
I think the honest answer at the moment, it's probably very much an innovation exercise. I think it doesn't deliver any immediate benefit, but when it comes to bond, the European bond market is about 7 trillion euros annually of issuance of bonds. So it's quite a big market. And it's still done what is called in the financial world is OTC, over the counter. So it's literally one bank calling up another bank saying, I'm going to issue bond. So it's a very manual, cumbersome process with lots of documents being sent back. So the potential, the regulators are actually really much behind that, because they're saying, if you've got this really fragmented, manual, intransparent market, it's an inherent systemic risk. And actually, we saw it in 2007-8. It literally took the banks weeks to figure out the kind of counterparty risk they had. So you got a very intransparent, inefficient market. So the regulator sees that as a risk. And for the issuer, because it's so fragmented and it's quite a cumbersome and costly process, it puts the bar very high. So the hope is that in the future, it lowers the cost. Any digital initiative or platform should lower the cost. It should make it more efficient and more transparent. So the issuers, everyone who's participating, hopes that in the future it will reduce the cost, make it faster, and make it simpler. The typical things you see with any digital platform.
Oh, interesting, very interesting. And then I guess you're heading up Switzerland, home of blockchain, and worked with Switzerland Global Enterprise in different markets. And part of that, I guess, is to attract companies from around the world to Switzerland to take part in the innovative ecosystem that exists in Switzerland. Is there anything in particular you would have to say if there's people in the audience, and I know there are some who are from blockchain companies here in Canada, any particular points you just say to them in terms of why they should be in Switzerland? To me, your presentations are covered that very in a number of aspects. But are there 2 or 3 key points you might make to Canadian companies who are in the blockchain space and looking to expand and to innovate?
I think we're very grateful to Canada. So it's a question because Vitalik Buterin, the co-founder of Ethereum, he was in Canada and he came to Switzerland, set up his foundation in 2014 here in Switzerland. So you could argue there's a historical connection. When I talk to companies, I think Switzerland has a few advantages. Obviously, we have a big financial system or financial market and private banking. So anyone wanted to interact with that in a regulatory framework that allows for banks, for funds, for custodians, Switzerland is a good jurisdiction. In Europe, next year, the EU has decided on a new law, so that might improve. The UK is making a lot of sound of also becoming more blockchain, crypto, digital asset friendly. But I guess at the moment, and that's what I've been telling a few companies, they're like this, you have the stability here, you come here and the processes are clear, the counterparties are knowledgeable. And if you want to be a good citizen, a responsible citizen, it's a good place to have a base because you can have a setup. I just had a meeting this luncheon from a UK company who now comes here because they like this predictability. Companies tend to like predictability. That's one thing. And the second thing, besides the banking systems, we have now a lot of industrial companies, luxury good companies dabbling in Web3 and NFT. So doing those pilots here, again, we're very innovation friendly. And you have the opportunity, if you can do a project here with Nestle or Swatch, they can take this abroad. So I would typically say those are the 2 things where companies get interested in. And when it comes to more, also the startup ecosystem has been growing, including funding.
Great. Thank you very much. We're getting some good questions in. Someone's asked, do you feel that the blockchain is the key to easing the fear that most people have about sharing their personal data and invasion of privacy? Can the use of the blockchain guarantee that personal data does not end up in the wrong hands? Very timely question.
And it's sort of harking a bit back to this video I showed. There's going to be so much more information produced in the future data. And I guess historically, we've been trained to hand over our data. So it belongs to Meta, to Facebook, to whoever, Netflix. We haven't learned how to take ownership. And blockchain, at least as a tool, would facilitate that in the future. So technically, it's possible. The question, I think, is always, what are the incentives for users to actually start taking care of their data? And as a friend of mine always negatively likes to point out, we humans are very bad in managing passwords. So in order to start dealing with data that's valuable, we sort of need to upgrade. But so having in a nutshell, overall, the technology, the blockchain enables that. I guess the user experience, the user friendliness is not there yet, where people will say at scale, hey, I want to move over, I want to have a wallet and start using it. But with all those things, I think, it's often convenience. It's so convenient just to use all those services. We never think there's an alternative. in the future, there'll be more alternatives that hopefully will be as convenient to use as the current ones. So I think it's a gradual change that will happen.
Okay, great, thanks. And another question is, could you describe what skills business owners, owners of small and medium-sized companies should look into to enable understanding, assessment, eventually participating in the evolving domain? The questioner was thinking particular of the content creation example, that slide that you had. So I guess, what skill set do small, medium-sized companies need to be able to get involved and participate in the content creation on the blockchain?
Actually, I get this question quite often. Recently, even an NGO approached me and said, what can we do? So typically what I would tell everyone is, don't get bogged down into technological discussions. Sometimes it's really easy to get, all caught up into decentralization and peer-to-peer and, proof of work, proof of stake, whatever the buzzwords are. But I think always start with use cases. And one of the interesting bits about the Swiss ecosystem, there are really many use cases, from luxury goods to sport, to NFT, to art, to music. And the typical thing would be, out of pure interest, just start following what they're doing. So that's step number one, just see what kind of use cases other people are implementing. And then if there's particular use cases that seem as a better fit, either approach those companies directly or that there's various advisors that sort of are helping along this way. And I guess at the end of the day, with any innovation project, I've been working with startups for a long time. It sort of define the goal and sort of be aware of the resource and the budget. I'm currently involved with one company that wants to have a bond digitalized in the future, and said, hey, first understand the landscape, understand the players, where it is, and then sort of decide, is this mature enough? Do I want to be a first mover? Do you want to be a fast follower, or is it okay once it becomes mass scalable? So I think that's with any innovation project, not even blockchain, AI. There's many things you can do in AI, and there's quite a few studies who show that a lot of those projects, after having a test or a pilot, they get abandoned. It's just like you do it once, and then you go like, oh no, I didn't understand correctly. So in a way, in a nutshell, I guess what I'm trying to say, it's innovation. It's also a skill set. It's a managerial skill set. It's not something that just happens. There's a lot of things you can learn. And I think building this skill set, like someone becomes a good accountant, there's certain do's and don'ts about in innovation, and learning those is probably the best first step before even having money involved or budget.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Someone else has said, thanks very much for your presentation, Alexander. I appreciate your comment about Switzerland having stable, reliable regulation. Do you have thoughts about the regulatory environment in Canada and whether that affects interactions between Swiss crypto companies reaching into Canadian markets? So I'm not too sure if you're, how you feel about that.
I have to pass on that one. I have no idea what the regulatory situation in Canada is. But maybe as an interesting, without knowing what it is, but currently there's a lot of discussion between UK and Switzerland, because UK, as you might know, left the EU, so they're a bit out in the wilderness. And historically, what I found is a very interesting sort of axis of collaboration is between Switzerland and Singapore. For many years, starting with the big banks, among the top 10 banks in Singapore, there's UBS, there's Credit Suisse, there's Julius Baer, so there's quite a few Swiss ones. And it's been a bit this hub and spoke, where Switzerland is the European hub and Singapore is the Southeast Asian hub. And that has worked pretty well. There's quite a few companies, actually quite a lot, that have a footprint in Switzerland or regionally in Switzerland, have that in Southeast Asia. So I guess the question, if you take this model, is, can Canada cover North America? I'm not too sure. Maybe the Americans do their own thing, but having that collaboration or a foothold into the European market through Switzerland is clearly something that has been done by quite a few companies. I'm not sure about Canada, Swiss companies going to Canada. I'm not knowledgeable about that.
I would just say that, from my understanding is that, following this market for some time is that the regulatory framework here is still being put in place, as it is to some extent in Switzerland, but I'd say we're pretty far behind. Maybe somebody on the call wants to put up their hand and suggest differently, which would be great. But when I've talked to companies quite often, they're saying, well, things just it's not transparent here in Canada. And I think that's the thing that I understand about Switzerland is the transparency and the willingness of regulators to try a lot of different new things. And I think that's really sets it apart from what's happening here in Canada. So I have a question. Another question is, let me try and rephrase this. In Lugano, are there other services that you're aware of where people are able to pay each other for services they provide? At individuals, for example, if you get something done at your home, or I saw you had McDonald's you could buy with Bitcoin your burger. You can buy your bond using the blockchain. What about, so this individual's asking about other services. Is it something that, I guess, can an individual just set it up? An individual business person set it up so that they accept blockchain or cryptocurrency? I expect it could, right?
I mean, interestingly, in Switzerland, the main credit card payment provider, I forgot, it's not WorldCom. I forgot the name, but the credit card company is set up to accept crypto payments as a vendor. I know as a fact because last year I bought a bicycle helmet with Bitcoin in a local bicycle shop. You see, he got a request. So technically, it's already possible across Switzerland. Through your credit card, you can pay with, if you got a crypto wallet, you can pay. So that's the technical feasibility. I think really in Zug, you can pay your taxes with crypto. And last time I checked, it was probably more than a year ago, no one did. I guess that sort of goes to the core of Bitcoin. I think in Switzerland, Bitcoin is not really a payment tool or instrument. It's more of an investment tool. However, whenever I speak for example, to African colleagues in Southeast Asia, where you don't have you have a lot of an unbanked population, you have a financial system that is not so well developed. I think in Switzerland, probably the same in Canada, we're overbanked. We're not lacking banking services. There's a lot of them. But in emerging markets, and I think there the payment, Bitcoin or crypto as a payment function is still very valid, or in Venezuela or in Argentina, or all those high inflation countries. So I guess that question is still a bit, I think no one would want to pay in Bitcoin at the moment, also because of this high volatility. It's as a store of value, it is a bit too volatile. So technically, you can in Switzerland. You can, there's a hotel here, a luxury hotel who's famous that you can pay with your Bitcoin wallet. How many people do it? I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks. And I have one a further question myself. You said that the expansion of crypto companies to Switzerland seems to be on hold. That's just probably reflecting the market itself, right? In terms of companies just being, being letting people go, shedding staff, cutting back, and yeah.
I mean, I've been talking to a few of the large US companies in that sector, and just as a result of their heavy regulatory enforcement on what's happening on the US market, they're refocusing. They just have shelf plans to come here for the time being. But that might change quickly again. But it's more a function of the market collapse and the regulatory action.
Well, here's an interesting one. Do you have any thoughts on ChatGPT? And do you see any synergies there with the blockchain?
It was interesting. I was at a ChatGPT meetup last night. I mean, my thought is like my daughters love it. They like to ask all sorts of silly questions, and it gives normally quite good answers. I mean, my biggest lens that I can have, and maybe it's not only. I mean, ChatGPT is just a text-based AI system. I think we're living we're living and in the future increasingly living in a world where data is paramount. Different type of data has different type of value, and the more data you have, it gets harder to sift through data. So the blockchain is good in safely storing and transactioning in data. It's not good in generating insights. So I think in the future, storing safely data and transacting digital goods and creating insights are both based on data. And I see in the future a lot of need for that. Because the more data you have, the harder it gets to process it. And I think ChatGPT, what it really does well, and I think it's true, it's like you ask it a question and it can go through so many documents and information bits that I can never do. There's no way I can do it. So it points you sometimes in quite interesting directions. My wife works in the pharma sector. She's been asking a few questions, and he points to certain studies, which is interesting.
Yeah.
So going forward, securely gatekeeping or safely gatekeeping data is one key function, but obviously then using it, just having it safely stored doesn't make it usable. So AI is clearly one way of in the future how to extract value from large amounts of data. So at that intersection, yes. Absolutely. If it's ChatGPT, I don't know.
I think there's going to be a lot of intersections with a lot of different things with the way AI is going. One last question, I think, before we let everybody go, and was Switzerland's push to create a regulatory framework around crypto and blockchain a coincidence, or was it a conscious and proactive strategy to become a leader in the space? In other words, was it just the Swiss desire to regulate and innovate that gave the impulse, or was it always a deliberate effort? So I think that's a very interesting question. Switzerland has been ranked the most innovative country globally for 11 years in a row. And so is this something that just happened out of innovation, or was there some kind of direction at the center, maybe to make Switzerland a leader in this space?
There's a very clear answer that there was never essentially planned strategy. Up to now, Switzerland has really struggles always when there's a big picture strategy. Like Singapore in corporate, they do that. Switzerland, because of our federal grassroots systems, never had that. And sort of, if you think, coming back to Canada, Vitaly Buterin was one of the key contributors that the whole ecosystem started. And he came here because he wanted to set up a foundation for his blockchain, and he was helped by a lawyer, Luca Müller from MME. So when you look at the nucleus of the Swiss crypto and blockchain ecosystem, were actually all foreigners in the beginning. Interesting. It was Swiss were interested, but the first movers were also from Zapgo, from Bitcoin Swiss. They're all foreigners starting it. So in a way, it was then, but it was taken up, and then in Zug it started growing. Then the Zug government got involved, and it's this very Swiss approach where certain innovation, it happens on a grassroots level, then it bubbles up. The Swiss are up to now, we're very cautious of top-down initiatives. We don't like that. And intuitively, you go like, it makes more sense to do a top-down. But I would argue in the Swiss case, no, it's not. I give you a very hands-on example. Like Singapore has really this top-down, this Singapore corporate. It's run like a family business. It has the government, it wants to get into sector, then it tells the regulators, the national bank, and so on. And they decided they looked at crypto purely from a payment perspective. So they only gave payment licenses, because Bitcoin is sort of used as payment token, you can argue. And they didn't like other licenses. And Three Arrows was a big hedge fund in this area that was not officially regulated there. The application was based there, and the regulator didn't pay attention, and they went bankrupt. And actually, the two guys who founded it, they escaped. And now the government is a really prickly situation because they've been pushing that, and now there's an accident. And I think that the political fallout is much bigger. obviously, when you push it from a government point of view, you need to sort of understand certain things. You need to pick the right technology, which I don't know anyone who can do that. It changes fast. Then you need to sort of set a strategy, incentive, and money and all that. So there's many decisions you need to make, and you have to get them right. And the only thing I know from an innovation approach, it's a messy process. Innovation is always messy. It's agile. Things go bust. So I would argue that the Swiss innovative approach is actually coming from a lack of central strategy. Even that intuitively to most people, it doesn't make sense. Well, it does if you let it bubble up. It's things that don't work, they die out again on a smaller scale, and things that are successful, like, Zug started with crypto, now you got Lugano, you got Neuchâtel, it becomes big, So this is a very unique Swiss way, and I think it works in Switzerland. I'm not saying it works everywhere, but I actually like it. I think it's a pretty interesting approach.
One thing I'd just say, one last comment I'd have is, you mentioned about the foreigners being involved. I was at events at Crypto Valley in Zug, and I forget the conference, it was a number of years ago. And it's a very large percentage of people working in the industry have come from all over the world. It really is a magnet. Switzerland's been a magnet for businesses from all over the world, and bright people, I would say, who are innovative from all over the world. So with that, I'll just quickly wrap up and thank you very much and pass it over to Sandra for the final thank you. But just for people on the call, if you have interest in knowing more about what you could do in the blockchain space in Switzerland, you can always talk to the Swiss Business Hub, or else Alexander, once again, what is your website again?
It's homeofblockchain.swiss.
Okay, that's the right.
You can reach out. We have a government mandate to help anyone together with the Swiss Business Hub. So, feel free to send me directly a question or to Mike. I'm happy to answer if I can.
Fantastic. Well, I'll turn it to Sandra for the thank you.
You're muted.
You're muted, Sandra.
Sorry, thank you. Thanks so much, Alexander, for a very interesting presentation, and Michael, to you for moderating the questions. It's such a fast evolving space, I guess, providing lots of opportunities, but still also raising lots of questions, especially, I guess, for people maybe less involved in the day-to-day of really like blockchains. But I think it's important to stay open to learn and to follow it maybe from the sidelines, most of us, on opportunities it really can create. And with cryptocurrency, I guess it's realizing that that's really two different avenues, and yeah, maybe a little bit riskier to some degree, kind of depending on, I think I just checked on the Canadian side, there's also different platforms where there are certain ones are approved, others not. So I think it's really to be mindful there where we are getting involved. Yeah, so again, big thank you to all of you as well for the active questions, for the times you have taken. We from the Swiss Canadian Chamber, we're actively working together with the Swiss Business Hub, and are really happy to kind of help in many ways to bring you interesting topics, as well as like if you have any suggestions and things you'd like to hear, let us know. But we are here in 2023 on providing you with hopefully lots of interesting events. So again, big thank you to Alexander and all of you for attending. So wish you a good rest of the day.
Thank you for having me. Bye, Sandra.
Thank you.
Take care, Alexander. Thank you. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Thanks so much, Michael.
That was a pleasure. Bye now.